All right, what's happening, everybody? Thought I'd do an update on this project that I've been working on. Originally, this was the blue and orange guitar. Blue and orange was what the customer said they wanted. I went through a couple different ideas on how to put the blue and the orange together so that it looked good. I had it looking clean, I had it looking tight, I had it looking very professional. The only problem was I hated it. I just hated it. It looked like it was done with care and, meticulous and planning, and I still hated it. So I took it all down. And I thought, why can't I come up with a color scheme for this guitar that's blue and orange that I'm gonna be happy with? And I think that the reason was because the colors just don't go together, right? Blue and orange, like there's no shade of blue and no shade of orange unless you go into like the pastels that you can put, that I could come up with, that I could put on a guitar that I thought looked like something I'd be happy with. And I figured maybe I need a third color that I could use to something that goes with orange and something that goes with blue. So what I came up with was this charcoal, which is a metallic charcoal. Uh, I'll show you the binding too. We're going to talk about the binding in just a minute. But I got this metallic charcoal. It's been dry sanded. This is the first color coat on this guitar. And I got my Bellin grain filler out after I took the blue and orange paint off of this. And I started to put it on the guitar, and I got like hard little boogies in the Bellin, and I had to keep picking them out. And it was a quart, right? And I still had more than half a can left, and I've done probably six, maybe seven guitars with that. But the top of the can, it's one of those metal cans, and the top of the can just started to rot, and I was getting rust inside the grain filler, and I wound up throwing it away. So I go on Amazon, and I'm like, this time I'm just going to buy that little tiny pint because it just doesn't last in the can. So I'm just going to buy a little one. So I click on the little one, and it says delivery time 5 days, and I was like, oh man, I don't want to wait 5 days. Let me just get another quart, right? Delivery time 5 days. I'm like, come on, man, I don't want to wait 5 days for this. I'm ready to work on this now. So I go out to the big box, and I'm looking at all the different grain fillers they have. The thing I like about the Bellin is it dries really quick, it feathers out really nice, and it sands like super, super easy. But that super, super easy part of the sanding always kind of bothered me because it's telling me that it's a really lightweight product, right? There's not a lot to it for it to just sand away like that. But when you cover it with your paint or your clear coat, it hardens up a lot. Like, think of it like you're patching a hole in the drywall. And when you put that joint compound on, it sands away really, really easily, right? But after you primer it, paint it, it's much, much harder. So the Bellin has always been good enough, right? And the fact that it sands out real easy, it feathers very nicely, those are kind of incentives for you to go with that brand. But I thought, let me see what else they got, because I don't like those metal cans. It's just going to rot out anyway. It's $40 for a quart of that stuff. This was $8 at the big box. It's new. I figured, let me give it a try. Let me see what I like about it. So, like most people, I bought it, I tried it, and then I watched reviews on it, right? Because that's how we roll, right? Uh, the reviews I saw, of course, they're all sparkly, shiny. This is the greatest thing that ever came along. I like it. It doesn't sand out nearly as easily as the Bellin. It's 3 times the work to sand it out than the Bellin, but it feathers out really nice, and it's a much harder finish than the Bellin. I like that. This was $8 versus the Bellin, $40. If I try it, I don't like it, I throw it away and go back to the one that I know works. So far, I'm pretty pleased with this. I don't mind doing the extra work, the extra sanding, because I feel like it's a harder it's as hard as the wood versus the Bellin, which is like a sponge in the wood until you start building up those color coats or clear coats. But this, I really like it. It is white. Now, for the whole back of this guitar, that's all I used. One scoop with my finger. I put it on a piece of cardboard or the back of a piece of sandpaper, whatever piece of scrap I had laying around. I just put it on there, and then I added a couple drops or 1 drop of this Kita dye, and it turned kind of gray, which was good because the color that I decided to go with, the color that I found that I liked, that I thought would integrate the orange and the blue together, is a metallic charcoal. It goes good with the orange, and it goes good with the metallic blue that I want to use. So here's where we're at. So after I put the grain filler on this, and I sanded it out dry. I never want to wet sand, even though the guitar was primered. I did not want to wet sand on the primer. I would be sanding that moisture into the primer, and that moisture would soften the grain filler. So whatever brand grain filler you're going to use, if it's water soluble, I think you're way better off dry sanding the project. It takes longer, it's more messy, it's more difficult, but you're not introducing that moisture, softening your project, your primer or your grain filler, or the wood. You're not softening that up with moisture and then creating problems that are going to later show up in the finish. So with the primer, the grain filler, and the first color coat, here's where I'm at. Now I've sanded this first color coat to 800, and there's a spot left that I missed that I'll show you guys. Here it is. It's right here, right in the charcoal. Let me see if I can turn it just the right angle that you guys can see it. Maybe not. Try this way. Right there. Right there. See that line across there? So that line is either a splintered out piece of wood that I missed that I now have to go back and fill, or something that I said, that's so minor that the paint will fill that, but the paint didn't fill it, right? It's one color coat, and I only want to do one more color coat. And if the first coat didn't fill it, I gotta put something in there before I, put the finished color coat on there, because the finished color coat, I'm gonna sand with like 1500 paper before I start clear coating. And that's so fine that it's not gonna cut any material away. So that imperfection would still be in the guitar, right? We don't want that. I'll go over it super intensely, but as I'm dry sanding, I'm looking at every last little inch of the guitar, and that was the only one that I saw that I thought would need to be filled. There's a couple of spots on the back. We'll see if we can find one for you guys. Let's see. There's one right here. Can you see that little? Oh, there's one. Okay. See those little shiny spots right there? Those are low spots in the paint. So that means that as I'm sanding this, my sandpaper is never touching that. That is way too tiny for me to try to fill that. So the finish coat of paint will fill that. Like that's shallow enough that I don't have to worry about putting any kind of filler in it. But that one over there, that's just a little bit too deep. I could build up the paint on it, but you know, the more you build up the paint, the softer and softer the finish gets. So you want the fewest amount of paint coats on here that you can possibly put, you know, and still have it look perfect. Okay, that's the grain filler. We're done talking about that. Let's talk about the binding. Go to Sweetwater or go to whatever your favorite guitar parts site is and order some binding. What are your options? Well, you can get black. You can get white. You can get ivory, or you can get bone. There are a couple sites that will have like a tortoise shell binding. That's mostly for acoustic guitars. I've never seen that used on solid body guitars. It's not the prettiest binding either. But those are your color options. What if you don't want those colors? So I've done other colors by making my own binding. What I make that out of is the this stuff right here. So there's two ways to do it: the hard way and the not as hard way. Okay, so the hard way is you cut your binding channel and then you build a dam around the border of the guitar, and then you pour your binding into it. Now there's all kinds of things you got to know before you try that technique. Like, number one, your dam can't be flush with the side of the guitar, because your dam is gonna bend in, or it's going to bend down. It's just not going to be perfect. So for me, I wind up putting like a double thick strip of tape right to this line, just the thickness of the tape, and then I put the dam on the tape. You can use tape to do that, but tape is soft and flexible, and it doesn't make the best seal. So you're gonna have leaks and drips, and they're gonna run down the body of the guitar. Also, on a Les Paul type body like this, the binding is not the same height here as it is here. You can see that the binding comes uphill right here, right? And what does water do, or liquid? It finds its own level, right? So you wind up pouring the resin into this channel, and it's going to level itself. So in order to get to the highest point here, you're going to be way high over here, which means you're going to have to sand it all back. And it can be a lot of work, and this guitar has had a lot of repair to the face of it, and I just don't want to sand that much. What I like about that technique is that it's one piece when you're done. It's all one continuous pour, shaped to the exact shape of the guitar. However, you're going to have leaks. You know, you're going to have to use a lot more uh, epoxy than maybe you want to, but you know that's going to be the case no matter what. But I mean, check it out. Orange binding. Have you ever seen that? No, you haven't, because it doesn't exist. Well, here it is. Now this is I'll tell you how I did it. I made you could do the pour it in the slot technique, right? Messy, a lot of work on a refinish like this guitar. Probably not the best option. So option number two is just pour a block of epoxy resin, a little, you know, thin, you know, about the height of the widest part of your binding, which on this guitar is going to be right here. That's the widest piece of binding right there. So whatever that height is, plus a little bit, because you always want it to be proud and you want to sand down. And then also you want to make it just a hair thicker than your binding slot, and you want to sand down to it, because what you don't want is you don't want the body of the guitar to be proud of the binding, because then you got to sand down the body of the guitar. So a good rule for me is to make twice as much as I need. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I also added the binding to the headstock on the guitar, which I didn't do the first time around. We did put a new a new fretboard on this neck that we did some major work to. We tore the truss rod out. The truss rod was like crooked. It just was not doing what it was supposed to be doing. And then we cut a channel down the neck and we glued in a piece of oak. And then we cut a straight channel through the oak. And then we put a new fretboard on the guitar. Now, to bind that fretboard, I had to pull all the frets out of that fretboard. But I knew I was going to do that because I wanted to put the customer's name inside. I wanted to make it part of the fretboard, right? So, cut or pour twice as much as you need. Give it 3, 4, 5 days to cure up, and then you can start cutting it. Now, here's the extra pieces that I got, right? And this is like a metallic orange in here, and you're going to see a lot of that's blue tape, right? Like, that's blue tape on there. Like, who cares, right? Because it's going to be proud anyway. That's all going to get sanded off. It does not peel off easily with your fingernail, so I just left it on there and then sanded it off. It's a metallic, so it's not going to be a solid color, right? And you're also going to see a lot of saw blade marks all over this, because this has not been added to the guitar. The ones that have been added to the guitar are looking much better after you sand out all those saw marks. Now, it's not that vibrant, right? It's not that boom that you may want, because it's orange, right? If you're going to do like a dull down orange, we're getting back to those pastel colors, which I think they're horrible. I hate guitars that are like pastel-y. Can't stand them. But here, how do you put that on? With more epoxy resin. You could super glue it, or you could use a binding glue, but why? Just make more epoxy resin. Right, there it is. So I just mixed up a little batch of more epoxy resin. I went around that channel painting this into the channel, and I also had enough to do that right there. So I just painted it into the channel, And then I took my strips that I cut out on the table saw out of the block that I made, and I just used epoxy resin to glue the epoxy resin to the wood, because epoxy resin sticks really well to wood, probably better than the super glue and definitely better than the binding glue, because it fills in every pore and plus it bonds to itself. Now there's a seam in this somewhere along here, because there's the center line right there. That's another little, probably a little splinter. I'm going to sand that a little bit further and then see if I need to put any filler in there. My finger says no. Then the color coat will cover all that. But look at the binding. Somewhere, I think it's right there. That's the seam where two pieces of binding butt together. And you know, the same thing, you got your wet epoxy resin, so you go around, you're sticking it in, you're taping it up there, and then when you get to the joint, you just brush a little bit where the two pieces are going to butt together, and it squeezes out, and you cover it with the tape, and then you just sand it all together, and that's what it looks like. Perfectly seamless. Here's a challenging area to do with binding, but remember, you're spreading more liquid in there that's liquid binding. So if you have any imperfections or gaps or anything like that, you've got the wet epoxy resin there already, so it's going to fill any gaps. After you cut it on the table saw, as you're sanding the body of the guitar, you're also sanding the resin. It's got a smell to it, so you might want to put on a mask, because it's got a strong odor to it when you start sanding away at it, but it comes out looking super sexy. Here's a piece. This is just right off the table saw, right? And let's see if we can find some saw blade marks in it. I got one where, oh, this one you could really see the blade marks. Okay, yeah, see all those diagonal marks in there? Those are from the table saw blade. Right now that sands out with like 320 grit and then 400, and then as you're sanding your way up, like 800 is usually plenty to get this to look nice and smooth, get rid of all those blade marks. And then it's still going to look just a little bit on the dull side. It's going to look very smooth and perfect, but a little bit dull. But once you lacquer it, here it is. Saw blade marks, not sand it. This is right fresh off the table saw. And there it is. And that's just one quick shot of lacquer. And look what it does. Look what it does to it. So not lacquered, lacquered. And I didn't even. Oh, that's the edge there. That's where I stopped. Yeah, you could see where I didn't sand back here. So you can see that if you don't sand out those saw blade marks, they're going to show through your lacquer. But over here, I sanded out all those saw blade marks and did one quick, real quick, very light with the lacquer. Once I do the guitar, it's going to have as many coats of lacquer on it as it needs, usually 4 or 5, sometimes 6. But you definitely got to make sure that you sand out your saw blade marks, because if you lacquer those in, you're going to see them forever. Like right there, see them? I can put 100 coats of lacquer on that. You will always see those saw blade marks. So you really got to pay attention. This stuff doesn't, it's not scraper friendly like the binding is because it's harder than the binding. It's still flexible. It's flexible enough to go around the guitar, but it does have a limit, right? So when you got the real tight curves, you may have to heat it. When I went around the horn, I hit it with a heat gun on low, just very low. I heated up the corner of the guitar a little bit, and literally like 3 seconds, like done, and it bends right around. But if you try to do that after this stuff is cured, it loses its flexibility, and that's about the horn, almost the horn. Let's try to get the horn. What could happen is you can go around your horn. You can go around your horn without heating it, and go, oh, look at that! I went around there and I didn't have to heat it. And then when you take your tape off of it, it's got a wow. Look at that! So I probably heated it up by bending it. But you can take your tape off of it, and it can be snapped, right? So heat it up just a little tiny bit. You could even take like a lighter, like a cigarette lighter, and literally just, and you're done. Like that quick, just zip, and that's all it takes. You tape it on there, and then it re-hardens back into that shape. Right there. There's no stretch marks. There's no bumpy marks. There's no white stretchies in that at all. Cause I heated it up. Okay, really loving how this binding is looking. Man, like that is just super, super sexy with the metallic paint. Once we get this paint, the finish color coat, and then we clear coat it, this and this are going to really complement each other. And then we're going to put some, this front of it is also going to be this color, but we're going to put some blue that goes really well with the gray. So we'll have the blue and the orange all on the metallic charcoal background. And that color should tie them together a lot better than the orange paint and blue paint. We hope. Because I'm not doing it a third time. Like, I'll just go gray and go, there you go, done. What I could do is I could just do this in the charcoal, the metallic charcoal, and then I could put more, I could do something with the binding at it. I'd have to channel out a part of the front of the guitar, but it would at least bring some of that orange into the front. But I don't want to do orange in the front because I've got the border of orange around the binding, along the neck, along the headstock. I don't want to overdo it. So I'm thinking that's where we're going to put the blue. We're going to get the blue and the orange on top of a color that should make them blend better than, the last attempt. It was a good attempt. It was a good try, right? But be honest with yourself. Like, if you don't like it, you don't like it. So sometimes I'll get a project so far along and I go, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to stare at it for 2 weeks. So I had it sitting there curing, and every time I come over and like drink my coffee, I don't like it. sometimes you got to just stare at it or leave it sit and come back to it. And that first glance, you know, what's your reaction at that first glance? And if you're honest with yourself and you really don't like it, then just say, I don't like it. That's not how it's supposed to be. Figure out how it's supposed to be. Take it all the way back down if you have to. The amount of work that we've done to this instrument, I'm not going to hand it back to the customer with colors that I just don't like. So, that being said, we'll come back. I got two different ideas for how we're going to do the blue and the gray on the front. But before that happens, I've got to finish the back and the neck, and I've got to get at least 2 coats of clear on it to protect that paint while I work on the front. What I'll do is I'll get the back, the sides, the neck completely color coat done. I'll lock that in with 2 coats of clear. I'll let that cure. Then I'll start working on the front. I'll take the front until it's 100% finished. Then I'll flip it over and finish the back. If this gets 5 coats and this only has 2 coats, I'll have to wet sand this because I'm going to be working on the front. It's going to get scarred, right? So I'll sand this. I'll bring this up to however many coats I got here. I'll match here, and then the last coat, I'll hang the guitar and spray everything together. We're going to sand this whole brand new fretboard down. We're going to make sure the radius is perfect. We're going to make sure that that is integrated perfectly into the radius of the rest of the fretboard. We pulled the horn back and put this deeper, and now look where my hand reaches to. Oh my goodness. Like, now I can reach that note. So, some really good improvements here. Only thing now is the look. That's all we got left to get perfect. So we'll come back after we get this all color coded. I'll show you guys the progress. And man, I hope I like it. If you hit it, right, then there's no, let me put it down and come back and stare at it or do a quick, I don't like it. You know, like if you hit it, you don't have to do that. Sometimes you gotta do it and you gotta go, well, the hardware is gonna be this color and it's gonna look, and sometimes as you're putting the hardware on, you're like, oh yeah, this is what it was supposed to be. And sometimes you're putting the hardware on and you're going, it's not really improving it the way that I wanted it to. And that's what was going on with this instrument. So tear down, redo, it's okay. It's not going back until it's how it's supposed to be. That's all I got, guys. Peace.